Some believe the doctrine of Christian Zionism is not biblical. How is this viewpoint presented? The viewpoint that the doctrine of Christian Zionism is not biblical is typically presented by critics who hold different interpretations of biblical texts and prophecies. They may argue against the theological foundations and claims made by Christian Zionism. Here are a few common arguments against Christian Zionism. 1. Replacement theology. Some critics of Christian Zionism believe in a theological framework called replacement theology or supersessionism. According to this view, the church has replaced Israel as the chosen people of God, and the promises made to Israel in the Old Testament are now fulfilled in the church. They argue that Christian Zionism's emphasis on the restoration of Israel is based on a flawed interpretation of biblical texts. 2. Selective interpretation. Critics argue that Christian Zionism often selectively interprets certain biblical passages, particularly those related to Israel and prophecy, without considering the broader context or alternative interpretations. They assert that this cherry-picking of verses can lead to an inaccurate and biased understanding of biblical teachings. 3. Political agenda. Some critics suggest that Christian Zionism is driven more by political motivations and geopolitical interests rather than strict biblical interpretation. They argue that the support for Israel, based on religious beliefs, can sometimes overshadow concerns for justice, human rights, and the well-being of all people in the region. 4. Peace and reconciliation. Critics may also argue that Christian Zionism's emphasis on the restoration of Israel can hinder efforts for peace and reconciliation between Israelis and Palestinians. They contend that a more inclusive and equitable approach is needed to address the complexities of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's worth noting that these criticisms represent the views of those who challenge the theological and political aspects of Christian Zionism. There are, of course, many Christians who support the idea of a Jewish homeland in Israel based on their own religious beliefs and interpretations of Scripture.